Hi, well, you just heard who I am. It's nice to be here. I think every author has this absolute terror that every time they have a book event, they will walk in and no one will show up. So thank you all for saving me from that fate. I appreciate it. So yes, I have written a book. You are here to hear me talk about it, I think, or blather in general. I don't know, one of the two. We may have both. So I will tell you a little bit about the book, and then maybe I will read a little from the book, and then maybe if you guys have any burning random questions you want to ask, we can do that. And if that doesn't fill the whole hour, then we'll organize a game of dodgeball or something. So, no, I wouldn't do that to any of you. I remember dodgeball grimly from grade school. So anyway, yes, House with Good Bones is a Southern Gothic, they tell me. A Gothic, I think, is anything where the house is a character. And so this technically then qualifies. It is, in fact, set in the South. It's set in North Carolina. And in fact, if you read the various cues, it's probably set somewhere in the vicinity of Goldston. And it's the house is something of a character, but it is a sort of prefab developer special that is set in a small subdivision. You've probably all seen the kind, and you know, the ones that are like just outside of city limits, and there's a bunch of fields with cows and things, and then there is a tiny little suburb with mowed lawns and sort of identical houses. And it's weird to me that a Gothic involves that kind of house and not the big towering mansions with the ghosts and the rattling chains and architectural features that I can never just remember what a crenellation or a battlement or a whatever is, a buttress. I know flying buttresses are a thing. I think they're in cathedrals. There's like the arch thing. I don't know. I tried to build them once in Minecraft and it went badly. So yes, it is a Gothic. It is a Gothic in that sense, but not in the, you know, architectural value sense. And it is about, well, a lot of things, but there are vultures in it, and there are insects. It is not, however, an insect horror book. Like, you don't go, the big horror, I will tell you now, is not insects, because I quite like insects. And in fact, when I was, the heroine, this is not a spoiler, you'll learn this on like the second page, is an entomologist, among other things. And so when I was writing this, I kept bothering all of my friends on Twitter who study insects, of which I have kind of a large number. I don't know why I follow all of these entomologists, but they're fascinating people. And I, you know, kept saying, all right, is this the right thing? Is this the thing that she would say? Is this appropriate? Is this, you know, correct? And then she happens to work at the Carnegie Museum of Natural History in Pittsburgh. And so I was up in Pittsburgh, and she was like, you want a behind-the-scenes tour of the entomology department? And I'm like, oh my God, yes, of course I want that. So we went out there. I'm actually going to take this off if you don't mind. I promise I have no diseases at the moment, other than, you know, the normal one that everybody has, I guess. I don't even know what I mean by that. Anyway, so I was up in Pittsburgh in this museum, and in fact, this is the entomology department where, if you saw Silence of the Lambs way back when, this is where they filmed the bits where, you know, they're pulling out the trays and looking at the moths with the skulls, and Jodie Foster was there, and so my friend's like, here, yeah, this is exactly where they filmed it, and here's the tray. And I looked at it, yep, that's moth. She's like, yeah, they kind of touched up the moths for the movie, though. So it doesn't look that much like a skull in reality. It's pretty good, but yeah, no, there was some aftermarket add-ons. But it was a fascinating trip, and I love people who are super passionate about something, which is probably why I follow all these entomologists, because they're all so passionate and thrilled about the thing they study. So like I follow a guy whose entire thing is millipedes. His world is millipedes, and he is so excited about millipedes, and I admire that enormously. I'm always like, man, I wish I was ever excited about something that much, which I am, but usually for no more than about 20 minutes at a time. So we're going around, showing me all these amazing insects, trays of beetles that all these incredible colors, and some of them have polarized shells, so you have to wear special glasses, and they turn like red or green. And why would a beetle have a polarized shell, light off their shell? They don't know. They don't even know quite how they do it. It's amazing. And then I'm looking through, the back rooms of museums are all inherently fascinating. They have, piles of stuff that no one is using anymore, but you can't throw it out because it's way too much paperwork to throw things out. So there's, all of these books and things that are incredibly obsolete, but fascinating. And she's like, here, this one is about how to build your own caterpillar inflator. And I'm like, okay, we're going to need to stop here and unpack this a little. Apparently, back in the day, when we did not have as good desiccant technology, shall we say, if you wanted to preserve a caterpillar on a pin or whatever, caterpillars are kind of full of stuff. If they're forgive this, they're juicy. Is the best thing I can. And so you couldn't, if you put it on a pin, you get a decaying caterpillar on a pin, and no one is happy, and the cause of science is not advanced in any way. And also, I assume there's a weird smell in the department. So in order to preserve your caterpillar, you must clean it. And so they would flip it over, open up, and scrape everything out, and I guess salt it or something so it would preserve, and then glue it back together and put it on the pin. But the problem is, if you take everything out, the caterpillar deflates, and it is now a flat caterpillar, which does not, again, advance the cause of science, because you want the specimen to tell people what they're looking for. So, and apparently entomology was way more of a hobby back in the 1800s. So you could not only make your own, and there were instructions in the back of things like Boy's Life magazine, how to make your own caterpillar inflator to reinflate your deflated caterpillar, but there were patented caterpillar inflators that you could purchase that would do this for you. And I am really sad to tell you that there is no patented caterpillar inflator in the book, because we had already gone to press by the time I was able to take this to it. So, which I consider a great loss, honestly. I was all for just writing a whole new chapter and putting that in, and my editor said a lot of things, mostly no. So I said, fine, I will write another horror novel, and it will have caterpillar inflators in it. And they said, well, as it happens, you are under contract for another one, so knock yourself out. So in a couple of years, there will be a horror novel that includes, among other things, patented caterpillar inflators. And this has nothing to do with the book in front of you, really, but it was just so cool. I mean, what is not to love about that? So anyway, this is the sort of thing that happens when you write books. You learn all of these fascinating things, and then you're like, I have to find a book to stick this in somewhere. Another thing that happens in the books is vultures. They are black vultures, which are a variety that is endemic in this area. They are from here, and pretty much only from the American Southeast. They're the ones, if you see them, that don't have red heads. They're a little smaller, and they're sort of gray, and they hang out in the big flocks, like at the side of the road. You'll see like 20 or 30 of them. And vultures are actually fantastic. I love vultures, which I realize seems odd, but all the people I know who have gone into wildlife rescue, and I know a fair number of them, those are also people I follow on Twitter, they usually, if they're going to work with birds, they go in going, I'm going to work with eagles, I'm going to work with owls, it's going to be great, and they come out going, vultures are the greatest birds on earth, and I would die for them. Because vultures are the only social raptors. They're the only ones that form more complex social bonds than, mates and offspring. And frequently they don't even like their offspring that much and kick them out as soon as possible. So, but vultures, live in these like huge extended families, and they all get together and giant roosts and hang out, and they will all show up at the same carcass, as I'm sure you've seen them, and then there has to be a fairly complex set of social interactions based on who is allowed to get close to the carcass and who is, relegated to the outskirts. So vultures have a social intelligence, which means they're much friendlier than any other raptors. Bald eagles basically just look at you and are like, do you have a fish? No. Are you a fish? No. Okay, then I have no use for you. Whereas vultures are like, hey, are you my friend? Are you part of my family? And they're cool. They also, have a perhaps deserved reputation for the fact that they don't smell great, but and do not allow one to vomit on your dog if you can possibly avoid it. There are terrible repercussions. You think getting skunk off a dog is bad. So for the vulture parts of the book, when I was doing research, I have a friend who happens to have a house vulture, and she has a wildlife rehab sort of center basically at home. And she did a lot of falconry and whatnot. But her great passion was vultures, and her goal in life is to start like the first United States Vulture Center of America or something where, injured vultures can come hang out. And she has had a baby vulture, and that lived in the house. And the photos were made. It was this little gray ball of fluff with big feet, and it just wandered around and was very social and always wanted to be where she was and would perch on the back of chairs and things. Yes, she put down a lot of tarps. I do wildlife rehab. You resign yourself to part of the house just being like that. And eventually, after quite a while, they have very long spans when they are juveniles compared to a lot of other birds. The vulture grows up and is still this, super friendly, hi, I want to be in the kitchen when you're cooking, I want to hang out, and eventually he had to go live in an outdoor flight cage most of the time, and she was like, it was terrible. We put him out, and he was just at the door like, excuse me, you have forgotten your vulture. I have my house vulture. But she was a endless source of information about vulture behavior and the bits that hopefully I got right. And so it was great to have these people to call on. So any bits about the vulture that are right in there are probably because of her. Any bits I got wrong, she tried to stop me. And now I should probably read from the book, although it occurs to me I don't actually have a copy in front of me. Can I borrow yours? Thank you, BJ. All right, I am going to read from the first chapter. God, words in books are smaller than they used to be. This wasn't a problem until about a year ago, and then.
Are your glasses in the car, dear?
No, my glasses are at home. All right, this is going to be fun. I had perfect vision my entire life, like better than perfect. It was a super amazing vision, and then I hit 45, and all of a sudden. I needed trifocals, and the nice optometrist is like, okay, actually getting used to those is really hard if you've never worn glasses, so since you can still see to drive just fine and can read road signs, we'll get you started just with reading glasses and computer glasses, and then, we'll work up to the progressives. And so I tried that, and then they tried to correct my astigmatism, and I felt like I was seasick for about a week because I had no idea that I had astigmatism, and suddenly everything sort of slanted badly to one direction because apparently I had been compensating for that in my brain that whole time. So I'm still not used to carrying glasses around, and as I said, this will be fun. There was a vulture on the mailbox of my grandmother's house. As omens go, it doesn't get much more obvious than that. This was a black vulture, not a turkey vulture, but that's about as much as I could tell you. I have a biology degree, but it's in bugs, not birds. Oh, it was the first page, not the second page. Go me. The only reason that I knew that much was because the identification key for vultures in North America is extremely straightforward. Does it have a black head? It's a black vulture. Does it have a red head? It's a turkey vulture. This works unless you're in the Southwest, where you have to add, is it the size of a small fighter jet? It's a California condor. We have very few condors in North Carolina. I bet you have some amazing feather mites, I told the vulture, opening the car door. The vulture tilted its head and considered this, or me, or my aging Subaru. I took out my phone and got several glamour shots of the bird. When I tried to upload one to the internet, however, my phone informed me that it had 1/10 of a bar and my GPS conked out completely. Ah yes, that at least hadn't changed. My mother lived on Lammergeier Lane, which made the vulture even more appropriate, although we don't have Lammergeiers, bearded vultures, in North Carolina either. They're a large species of vulture from Africa and Eurasia that eats bones. Why would you name a private road after a bone-eating vulture from a different continent? I looked it up one day when I was bored and discovered that the developer of the subdivision had been obsessed with birds. His first project had been Accipiter Lane, then Brambling Court, then Cardinal Street, and so on through the alphabet until Whippoorwill Way, whereupon he died, presumably so he did not have to come up with a bird for X. The correct answer is Xantu's Merlet, but I admit it doesn't exactly roll off the tongue. Lammergeier Lane was a type of subdivision that we have all over the South, although I don't know if they've migrated out to other areas. Damn it, this is exactly the talk I gave earlier. No wonder it sounded so familiar in my head. You'll be driving along a rural road surrounded by trees, cow pastures, and the occasional business that sells firewood, propane, and hydraulic repairs. Then you'll see a dilapidated trailer and a sign for a private drive. You turn onto the drive, and suddenly there are a dozen cookie-cutter houses lining the street, all with neat lawns. The road either terminates in a cul-de-sac or links up to another, even more rural road. You are required by tradition to have the dilapidated trailer, which is generally owned by a grumpy survivalist who refuses to sell. Otherwise, the residents will have nothing to complain about and will become fractious. My grandmother, that odd, frustrating woman, had bought the third house on the right side of the street and lived there for a number of years. We moved in with her for a year when I was 10, then Mom managed to get us an apartment and we moved out again. Then Grandmaid died when I was 14 and we moved back in. Now I was 32 and here yet again. The subdivision looked exactly the same as it had when I left. It had hit that stage where all the covenants have lapsed and someone has put in a chicken coop and someone else's lawn is going to seed. I approve of this, it supports far more insect life. And there's a truck on blocks tucked almost out of sight behind a shed. Subdivisions can persist in this particular developmental stage for decades before they finally pupate into their adult form and become a neighborhood ripe for parasitizing by developers. I looked across the street at Mr. Presley's house. Was he still alive? He had to be in his 80s by now. Yep, sure enough, the curtains on the big window were just slightly cracked and I could make out the outline of a pair of binoculars. Mr. Presley was a one-man neighborhood watch, whether the neighborhood wanted it or not. He was convinced that rural North Carolina was a hotbed of murderous activity. If I didn't get moving soon, he'd probably call the cops on me. Put out an APB on the fat woman with the curly hair, I muttered to myself. It was malicious standing, officer. I saw it with my own eyes. And parking her car with intent. There aren't many social advantages to being fat, but I'll give it this. Nobody ever thinks you're a cat burglar. So Presley was still alive and the trailer was still there. Cell coverage still shaky. My grandmother's front yard was still covered in roses. Despite my mother having lived here for nearly 2 decades, I still thought of it as my grandmother's house. About the only thing that had changed on Lammergeier Lane was that the Bradford pear trees had mostly died and been replaced with crepe myrtles, and apparently vultures. The vulture in question was still sitting on the wooden crosspiece behind the mailbox. I had no idea if it was hostile, nervous, or about to launch itself at my head. They don't have facial expressions like mammals. Mind you, I'm not that great with mammals either. The screen door slammed and I heard my mother calling, "Samantha, Samantha, you're here." "Hi, Mom," I said, not taking my eyes off the bird. "Did you know you've got yard vultures?" "Don't mind them, they belong to the lady down the street," Mom said. I turned to stare at her. They what?" "Well, not belong exactly. There's a tree." She waved her hand towards the end of the street. "Oh, never mind, I'll explain later. Don't worry, they're harmless." "Don't they puke when they get upset?" This is just about the only fact I know about vultures, and only because an ex-boyfriend of mine got too close to one once and found out the hard way. In retrospect, the vulture may have had the right idea. Oh yes, Mom beamed at me. One threw up all over the Goldberg's beagle. Fortunately, this vulture did not seem particularly inclined to vomit. I backed away until the car was safely between us, then turned and hugged Mom. "It's so good to see you, honey," she said. I didn't say anything because I was just realizing she had dropped a scary amount of weight since the last time I'd seen her. The women in our family are either fat or skeletal, and it felt like she had switched sides in the last year. I could feel her ribs and the knobs on her spine. "Good God, Mom," I said, stepping back. "Are you okay? You don't have cancer or something, do you?" Tact. I do not have it. No. She smiled, but her face had gotten as thin as the rest of her, and I couldn't tell if she looked worried or if it was just the new lines around her mouth. "I'm fine. Do you know how long you're staying?" "Haven't a clue," I admitted. "They found human remains on the dig, so we're all furloughed till it gets sorted." "I'm so sorry." She grabbed one of my duffel bags out of the car. "I know you were excited to work on this one." They've promised to bring us all back on. Hopefully it won't take too long. I'm an archaeoentomologist. It's fine, you've never heard of me. I study insects and archaeological remains. This is a real job, by the way. I follow several of them on Twitter. Actually, if you're in the field, you probably have heard of me because there's hardly any of us. You've almost certainly heard of Dr. Wilcox, my boss, who did all that amazing work with sawtoothed grain beetle larvae found in food storage from the Viking era. Anyway, my job is mostly spent either sitting in a room, sifting through dirt from digs, looking for dried out insect husks, or staring at photos somebody else took of dried out insect husks, fiddling with the brightness and contrast to see if I can make out any details. Occasionally, I do get out to dig sites, which I enjoy a lot more. My particular specialty is Pacific Northwest Paleo-Indian middens, but I get dirt samples from all over because, as I said, there aren't that many of us. It was a dig that brought me back home. Started the season, the promise of a whole lot of hands-on time in the dirt instead of staring at photos. I'd told my roommates I wouldn't be back for 6 months, shoved my furniture into storage, and went off to play in the Paleolithic midden. And then, like I told Mom, somebody found human remains on the third day of serious digging, no less. No, that was the end of that. The whole project was on hold till the Native American Heritage Commission could sort out what tribe the bones belonged to and if they had any living relatives who would want them back for burial. Some archaeologists get bitter about these sort of regulations, apparently, but I personally don't want to muck around with anybody's ancestors. It seems rude and just generally tacky. Anyway, give me a trash heap over a grave any day. A grave tells you how people act when they're on their best behavior in front of death. Trash heaps tell you how they actually lived. The problem was I'd announced a 6-month absence, and my roommates had already sublet my bedroom to an exchange student. Also, I had no real idea when the litigation would get resolved. Sometimes they can sort these things out in a couple of weeks if all parties are trying hard to get along. Sometimes they drag on for years, and the person in charge of the dig tells us to take other jobs and they'll call back. So I called up Mom and told her I needed to come back home for a bit, and of course she had alternated between concern and enthusiasm, which is Mom's normal state of being. "I'm so glad to see you, honey," she said again, giving me a worried look over her shoulder. The line between her eyebrows had grown deeper since the last time I'd seen her. "I just wish it didn't have to be here." "Here?" It seemed like an odd thing to say. "Oh, you know." She opened the door and waved me inside. Laden with all of my clothes and about half my worldly possessions, I inched past her and set my duffel bags down with a grunt. Well, just because your dig was canceled." She hugged me again. I had a feeling it wasn't what she'd planned to say. My brother Brad had said he thought we needed to check in on Mom more often. At the time, I thought he was just worrying too much. Now, seeing how thin she was and how harried she looked, I started to think he should have called me sooner. "Are you sure everything's okay, Mom? I don't mean to impose. It's just that Brad and Maria have no space, and I figured it had been a while." No, you know this is your home, too." And she hugged me again, which is Mom all over, always anxious to make sure that no one feels unloved for even an instant. "Sure, but I don't want to interrupt any hot dates." I grinned at her. "If you need me to get lost some evening." She swatted clumsily at me with a duffel bag. "Thank you, no. All the single men my age want either a trophy wife or a housekeeper, and I'm not doing either." "All right," I drawled. "Two sexy single ladies living the fabulous single lifestyle, then." Mom gave me a droll look. "So, boxed wine and binging British crime shows. It's like we're related or something." I turned towards the stairs and stopped. Something had been bothering me since I stepped in, but it wasn't until I saw the wall over the stairs that I realized what it was. "You repainted everything." Mom has always loved bright colors. We painted almost as soon as we moved into the house after Grandmaid died. Bright yellow in the kitchen, lime green on the staircase, deep blue in the downstairs bathroom. In a way, it had primed me for living in Arizona with all its rich terracottas and turquoise. But now I was standing in the house and the walls were white. Eggshell. Ecru. All the various shades, they're just white under different names. Oh, well, said Mom, sounding embarrassed. I thought it was time for a change, and, you know, all those colors, some people might think it was a bit much. It's your house, I said. Well, who cares what other people think? Then it occurred to me there's usually only one reason you repaint all the walls white. Are you thinking of selling? No, said Mom, nearly a yell. I blinked at her and she flushed. Sorry, honey, I didn't mean, I'd never sell. Of course I wouldn't. Okay, that's fine. I'm sorry, that didn't come out like I meant. She was getting flustered and I tried to salvage the situation. No, Mom, really, I wasn't judging. It just surprised me, that's all. It looks very bright and airy. I also thought it looked very generic suburban white people chic, but I kept that to myself. She led the way upstairs to my old room and pushed open the door. I paused on the threshold. She'd repainted here too, but not in ecru. Antique rose, Mom said. It's almost the same color as it was when we moved in when I was a kid, isn't it? Is it? She frowned. I don't remember. I think so. I set my bags down on the bed with a woomph. It looks nice, I added, since Mom had the line between her eyebrows again. I actually preferred the old color, which had been a restful blue, but I hadn't lived here for years. It wasn't my place to police what color Mom painted her guest bedroom, or the rest of her house for that matter. Still, ecru. It's like if you couldn't decide on white or beige and combined the two for maximum blandness. There was a doily on the chest of drawers. I eyed it warily. I have nothing against doilies, but they're a slippery slope. You start with doilies, pretty soon it's crocheted table runners, and then it's a short step to antimacassars. I still don't know how you pronounce that word. I've written that word a number of times. I'm still not sure how you say it. As if doilies are some kind of larval form, and the table runners are an instar in their development. But then are the antimacassars and the adult form, or just a later instar? Perhaps the adult form of the doily bears no resemblance to its juvenile stages. Mom, I said, cutting off this chain of thought before it got any weirder, I love you to pieces, but I've been driving for 3 days and I think I need a nap. I'm getting loopy. Oh, honey, of course, you must be exhausted. Yeah, you know. The one good thing about the dig being put on hold only a few days in was that I hadn't yet made the drive up from my apartment in Tucson to the dig site in Oregon. The phone call had literally caught me heading to the car that morning. So instead, I'd taken my already packed up car and driven from Tucson to North Carolina, which is a longer trip, mostly involving Texas. God, there's just so much Texas. I can handle all the other states, but Texas lengthwise really breaks you. I attempted to express this to my mother, which mostly involved wild arm gestures and the words El Paso uttered in intervals. Take a nap, Mom advised. I was going to order a pizza for dinner. You are a saint, I said, collapsing under the bed, an absolute saint. Did someone start delivering away out here? There's a place in Siler City that will. Do you still like ham and pineapple? Very much so. Mom closed the door. I rolled on my side, still thinking vague thoughts about doilies pupating. I'd just gotten to the point of wondering if I could get a grant to study the life cycle of crocheted tablecloths when sleep overtook me. All right, that is the first chapter. Though, I swear they're making the print smaller in those things. I think my theory is that paper has gotten substantially more expensive, but ink hasn't, so that if, we can just cram more words onto the page. Or possibly I'm getting old, but I refuse to think that's the case.
Just keep trying here.
That's my husband. Yes, I do in fact live with him and his chickens. I did live with him and his children for a while, but they've all gone to college now, and the chickens are not going to go to college anytime soon. They're some of them are extremely bright for chickens, but that's still not a high bar. Well, no, chickens are extremely bright about things that matter to chickens. Anyway, yes, a question, yeah.
Well, I was just suggesting you could go for an MBA.
They could, yeah, well, some of the chickens, I could, well, anyway. So yes, that is the book that I wrote and that you have in front of you. It is, as you guessed, set in very rural North Carolina, and there is something very wrong with the house, and Sam's mother is acting very strangely and has begun trying to make everything very generic and very acceptable, and it is extremely troubling. And it carries on being troubling, and then hopefully builds past troubling into, holy crap, what's going on? This is terrible. But I mean, I'm a horror writer. You want to end up there somewhere. And then finally into, this is the terrible thing, but oh God, there's still like 50 pages left to go. Okay, that wasn't the terrible thing. This is the terrible thing. And yeah, you know how the plot's like that. It's the standard 3.5 act structure. So anyway, does anyone have any questions? I am happy to talk about whatever, this book, other books. Yes, in the back there.
You mentioned that by the definition of a Gothic novel, the house was a character, and I was just thinking about some of your other horror books and how the houses also sort of are very prominent as being very unique, interesting places, like the Oddities Museum and the Hollow Places and the like.
Yeah, I was actually on a podcast a while ago. Someone was interviewing me about this book and said, okay, I'm just going to ask, what do you have against houses? And I was like, well, have you ever had a mortgage? And she allowed us how, yes, she did in fact have a mortgage. And I'm like, yeah, I never started writing books like this until I stopped renting, and my name was on the deed, and it was like, oh my God, everything keeps breaking, but you can't move away. And the central problem of every horror novel is that there is a point where any sensible person will be like, oh, hell with this, and just leave. So you have to like put off that moment as long as possible and have reasons for them not to leave. And so I think a lot of creepy house books are based on, no, your entire financial life is sunk into this building. So whether, you know, the ceiling is collapsing or it's haunted or, you know, there's a portal to hell in the TV set, leaving is really not an option. Yeah, I do kind of miss the old days of classic Gothics when the heroine is usually, you know, the penniless governess or something and can't leave because, you know, will die in the gutter, or the, you know, creepy servants won't drive her to the town or whatnot. It was much easier. In these days with cell phones, it's sometimes tricky to have reasons that people have to stay where they are long enough for the rest of the book to happen to them. So yes, but yeah, houses. Houses are a thing. I mean, there's probably a lot of other deep psychological stuff about it. It's the place you're supposed to be safe, and if you're not, you know, there at home, or you're at home and the safe place and things are still coming at you, but I actually think the mortgage is probably a more deep-seated terror. Yes.
So on that same line of questioning, and you mentioned cell phones, it was part of the plot line, and that it's so rural. The heroine has some cell phone difficulty.
Yes, actually, in this one, it's I don't know if some of you have probably had this problem. I certainly have. Is she has internet on her laptop, and the cell phone is like, yes, I can absolutely talk to the internet as long as you want me to do anything but talk to the internet. It's so yeah, it's she can drive anywhere. She has a car, she can get signal, but she can email from the laptop. But it's yeah, and again, you know, I live in Pittsburgh for quite a while. There were places in the house that I could not take a phone call. I, at various points, had to take important calls while standing outside because that was the only place with reception. It's better now, but there were a few exciting years there.
So's your phone.
Okay, yes. My husband also made me upgrade my phone a few times, but I still said they added more cell towers or something. And the book, The Twisted Ones, it is also rural, and the heroine is struggling with cell service, but the problem is that her phone keeps overheating, which was a real Apple bug that really happened, and your phone would just overheat and turn itself off, and if you tried to charge it, it would, just get worse and worse. So it is set in the narrow window of time where that Apple bug was going on. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Anyway, yes.
So I'm not much of a horror person, and every time I go to engage with a piece of horror media, I use her as my gauge of like, how scared will I be on like a scale of 1 to 5? And we've been debating whether or not that's a fair question. And as a horror author, I thought you might have something to say as to whether or not there is such a thing as a scary scale and where this book might land on it. If there is.
Okay, the problem is the scale is individual for every single person. Like horror is, I swear up and down that the closest genre to horror is romance, because it's the only other one that's defined.
You write horrific romances.
Okay, yes, I do write romances where horrible things happen frequently, but it's the only one where it is defined by what you're supposed to feel as opposed to the setting or whatnot. It's you can have a horror novel set in any era, you can have a romance novel set in any era. I don't know if anyone's tried to do a Paleolithic sci-fi novel. If they have, more power to them. So it's okay. Yes, they have. It was the Helconia series. Anyway, no, sorry. It was back in the day. So the problem is the things that I find scary, you might not find scary, and the things that you find scary, I might be like, eh. For example, the movie that still has scared me the most in my life is The Mothman Prophecies. And I was talking to yes, thank you. I was talking to a gentleman who does a podcast, and he was like, I watched that movie because you recommended it. Nothing happens in that movie. No, it kind of doesn't. It's all just, yeah, I don't know. It still scared the pants off me. I know people who were terrified by Blair Witch Project. I wanted to just punt them all into the sun. So everything is extremely individual. And that said, my other theory is that many horror authors are extremely scared of things, and we write books so that other people will also be scared of it because misery loves company. So I write things that I personally, find alarming, like possibly the scariest scene I have ever written. I still swear to this day was there was something at the window, and I won't spoiler anymore. But and yeah, because that terror, I have always been sort of sneakingly afraid that I will look at the window in the dark and there will be something looking back at me. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to write that scene. And people are like, okay, that was horrible. That was a lot. And I'm like, okay, good. That was sort of cathartic for me to write. But that said, there are things that have scared me that I have not written books about. I'm still scared of gray aliens. I think I saw X-Files too many times, possibly while doing drugs in my youth. Don't do drugs, kids. The only thing I can say with mine is that I never killed a dog. Me and Dean Koontz are going to go down as the two people who will never kill the dog. And unless you read Nettle and Bone, where it's not that the dog dies, but it's complicated. I tend not to write the everyone dies horribly at the end, and the ending is a terrible, bleak, all is despair kind of thing, because I don't like reading those. I read them and then I go away going, well, that was a downer. So generally they have, if not a happy ending, wow, I have severe PTSD, but at least we're alive ending, so, which is good for horror. Also, I have noticed, circling back to the house thing, possibly because in my previous life as a children's book author, my editor had to have the talk with me several times that we are not allowed to solve our problems with arson. On at least 2 occasions, my solution in a horror novel has been, let's just burn the house down, which is a perfectly logical solution. Not this one, no spoilers, the house does not burn down in this one, but there have been others where I've been like, no, really, that would fix everything. That would have been my solution to the movie Poltergeist as well. You know?
Yeah.
I have insurance, and that was back in the days when, as long as you weren't there, it didn't matter. They would give you the money anyway. Yes.
So you just made reference to the children's book you've written before, and some of the romances you've
Yes.
written. You've written a lot of different types of books. I'm really curious about that because I don't tend to see that from other authors, or I guess I should say I don't seem to see that successfully from other authors. I was wondering if you have some insight into how you've done it.
Well, partly the terrible ADHD helps. Like I said, I am very passionate about things for about 5 minutes or long enough usually to sell a book on proposal. And then I have to keep remembering to be excited about it while actually writing the book. And sometimes I am. I mean, I'm never going to get over the caterpillar inflators. That one's just there forever. But there are 2 reasons, and one of them is that many authors probably don't want to do that, but a lot of authors I know actually do want to do that, and they're like, I have always wanted to write Gothic, or I've always wanted to write Western, or whatever. Okay, no one ever said I've already wanted to write Western. that genre is as dead as the name of the jacket, but damn it, now I want to write Western. No, okay. But publishers tend to not want to do that because it's very, I mean, you want to build up a following, you want readers who are like, you know, okay, they like horror, so they will buy this horror novel, and if you insist on bouncing around between a bunch of different genres, either you have to have really wonderful readers who will come along for the ride, which I'm usually lucky for, or multiple publishers, or multiple pen names, or all of the above. I know there's a couple who have written like fantasy novels and romances under 2 different names. Or Barbara Michaels was she also Elizabeth Peters, or who wrote Gothics and then mysteries set in, I want to say, Egypt or something. And I just have been unwise enough, I think, to do it all under the same name. So, and it helps that there's been some self-publishing scattered in there, which is useful because that way, if I suddenly decide I want to write a Western, damn it, I can go write a Western, damn it, even though none of my existing publishers would probably touch it with a 10-foot pole. But yeah, so I did have to get a pen name for going from strictly kid stuff to adult stuff because you really only need to have the experience once where you're in the library and somehow they got a hold of the fantasy novel you wrote when you were much younger under your real name, and they found the single small press that had copies and did it as a giveaway, and an 8-year-old boy just won it, and you're like, that's the one with the torture scenes and lesbian elf sex. Oh, I did the slow motion across the room and managed to basically call her his mother and was like, I have an Ark of the Next Dragon Breath book, please either give me that or you read it, but no, don't. And she was very gracious and pen name good. So yes, there are some authors who are allowed to write both for children and adults and no one gets weirded out. Clive Barker, Neil Gaiman. I think some of it's probably, honestly, that they're dudes. There's kind of a view, I think, that if you are a female children's book author, you are a lovely, motherly type who, is yeah. And then there's me, who has the maternal instinct of wood glue and.
No, wood glue wants those attachments.
Yes. And
Love you, dear.
But it doesn't let go even when they're bad attachments.
That's true. That's true. Yes. Okay, the scars have faded. Yes, in the very back.
What got your passion started as a writer?
Well,
How your passion started as
what got my passion started as a writer? I'm not actually sure that I had so much of passion, so much as it didn't occur to me not to be one. I was good at writing, and I wrote things. And when I was in first grade, some competition. I was like third in the state of Oregon for a short story or something, which honestly, even at the time I was writing it, I thought this is such absolute pandering crap. I was a very cynical child. And, okay, I probably didn't know what the word pandering meant, but I knew the feeling, and that was there we were. And so it just kind of snowballed from there. I wanted to be a writer, and it didn't occur to me not to be a writer, and I kept writing things. And then I got into college and realized that writers were broke all of the time, so I thought I will become an artist because there's more money in it. Because my life choices have always been somewhat questionable. So I was sort of right. There was slightly more money in art at the time, at least if you were doing internet commissions for $100 a piece in the late 90s. But that was all long ago and far away. And then eventually I sort of wandered back to writing as this is a thing I could be doing, and I like doing it. And I had, in fact, written the novel with the torture and the lesbian elf-sex and sent it to a publisher because that was, what the copy of Writer's Market said you did with books. And so I, did all the things they told me. I wrote the cover letter and printed it all out. This was in basically the Paleolithic, and I sent it out, and it came back with a very nice 2-page handwritten letter from an editor saying, this is fun, but I'm not sure if we should be the ones to publish this. Please keep this in mind in the future. And I was like, I got rejected and shoved it in a drawer and didn't think about, writing books again for years, which had I had a smidge more knowledge of the industry, that is basically the 1% point before publication when the editor is not just stamping it with, oh God, get this out of my face. But I didn't know any better, so writing just seemed like a thing you did, and I read a lot of books, and honestly, when I was quite young, I think part of my motivation was that I had read all of the books with talking animals in the library, and these days there are tons of them. There are, warriors and the ones with the owls and everything, and in my day we had Watership Down and we liked it. It was uphill to the library both ways. And then we had the animated version from Blockbuster, and some of us did not like that at all. I actually loved it. My grandmother was deeply weirded out by it. Anyway, and so I was like, clearly if more of these are supposed to exist, more of these should exist, and I will have to write them. So I was trying for a long time to write the books that I wanted to exist in the world, which I suppose now we have fanfic to fill a lot of that need, and in fact much of my early stuff was Watership Down fanfic, and that was Watership Down Star Trek crossover fanfic, and thank God none of that survived to the present day or even the last few decades. So anyway, any other questions? Yes.
Okay, I've been trying to figure out how to formulate this. Regarding horror and this weird thing, like some people think that like horror and comedy are nearly the same, and it's not wholly wrong because there's the tension and the release of tension. But there's this thing that a few directors I've noticed can do, which is they can make you laugh and not relieve any of the tension. And that's you know, because like otherwise, like, you know, the cat jump scare, just, oh, the tension's gone, usually, or something like that.
Right. Well, there's the director trick. Like we all know by now because we've seen enough horror movies that the movie is the music is doing the scary rising thing, and then you turn and it's the cat, and you relax, and all of us know now that the serial killer is standing right behind you. Like at this point, it's not even. It's gone beyond cliche. It is transcended into something else.
Do you have any input on how horror, or how some really proficiently made horror, can deliver a laugh that is uncomfortable and keeps the tension disturbing?
I don't know. I have no idea if I'm doing that. I know that people keep telling me my horror novels are very funny, and that's good. That's mostly because if I write anything long form, and I eventually just start writing humor because that's what I'm good at. I can only stay serious for about the length of a short story. And secondly, I think it's that I don't know if there are any atheists in foxholes, but there are a lot of comedians. Like I think 90% of the people I know in terrible circumstances, you know, start cracking jokes because it's just the human sort of defensive thing. And I think that might be part of it. It's you're joking to relieve the tension, but nothing changes that relieves the tension. I mean, like, I got years ago fell down the stairs outside in the back and sprained my ankle just brutally. Screamed like a dying Muppet, and it was a nasty sprain, like one of those where, you know, doctors like a break would have healed much easier than this. And so and even then on the ride to the emergency room, I was cracking jokes. The even better, God help me, example, at the risk of too much TMI, there are certain insertions of birth control devices in women that is an excruciating experience that it is pain by a whole new definition of pain. I am hilarious when that is going on. I start making up my own words to the Battle Hymn of the Republic, which often involve "We are never having sex again." At one point, I have had a doctor have to stop me because he was like, I have to with the surgery. I'm laughing. And believe me, none of that made it hurt any less bad. Like, it was still agony. I was still going to be there in agony for quite a while, but you just start laughing because otherwise it's just going to be a horrible, uncomfortable silence with you and the terrible pain. So, yeah, I don't know if that answers anything. I think the only solution to try to keep tension is to just keep the horrible pain there while you're having the characters make jokes. Yeah. Any others? I have no idea what our time is like here.
It's 6:55.
Oh, okay, 5 minutes. Yes.
Any more Paladin books coming?
Yes, there will be. I'm aiming for the fourth one to come out this fall. I really wanted it to come out in the next, between here and August, and that's not going to happen because it turned out to be really long. I just hit 100,000 words on it like yesterday.
Ooh.
And so it's, and I still have more stuff that hasn't gotten done, but yes, it will hopefully land at the end of the year, and that will be good because I feel a little guilty that I think it's been like a while since one of those came out. Ultimately, I'm hoping there will be 7 in the thing so that we wrap up, you know, burning questions like what actually happened to the dead god and things like that, because people are always like, are we ever going to find that out? And I'm like, yeah, I'm not a monster. I'm going to just leave that one hanging. So, yeah. Anyone else? Quick question? Yes?
It's actually not a question, but I'm going to have to get a copy of that one you were starting out with, because there were so many personal references.
Oh,
A friend of mine had a very disgusting but hilarious story about a turkey vulture. My grandmother made antimacassars. My house has recently had to undergo being realtor white. I've just moved to North Carolina from Southern California.
yeah, it's the in order to sell something like horror, you gotta make you've got to like almost present your credentials. Like, okay, the terribly unrealistic thing is happening, and you believe it because all these other things happened that you totally believe, and so you have to. When they say write what you know, I think it should be write what other people know also, so that they will stay with you the whole time, and then you get to the bit when they're just like, oh God, that's horrifying, but you got the Ecru rights, you're probably right. That is my hope anyway. Yes?
This is just a quick question, but I'm reading the Paladin series right now, and I'm absolutely loving it, and it's really reminding me of another one of my favorite authors, Tamara Pierce, and I'm wondering if you're a fan of hers or what your relationship is.
It's a weird thing. I am a huge fan of hers. I did not actually read her books as a kid when it would have been the ideal time, but I love her to pieces because we've been on panels together, and I have had dinner with her a few times, and she is marvelous. We were at this convention once, and a very nice author had written a self-published book, and which is great. I have written them. That was fine. The panel was on self-publishing, and her husband had decided that the best way to market this book was to sell the house, buy an RV, put the 2 kids in the RV, homeschool the kids, drive around the country hand selling the books at conventions. And I, was sitting here with the for the record, self-publishing is great. If any of you want to go that route, don't do that. Do not get the no, never. Oh, Jesus, no.
Can I just say that I was sitting in the audience watching this going,
the horrified silence rolling off. And I wind up at dinner with Tamara Pierce right after that, who was like, we should slash his tires in the parking lot and call Child Protective Services. I thought, Jesus Christ, this seems a little hardcore. But yeah, she is fantastic, and I love her. Yes, and wrote very good children's books. Okay, look, inside a lot of children's books authors is a very repressed horror author, or sometimes not repressed. So, whereas horror authors are all generally very chill. If you get a chance to meet them, they're all like super laid back because, I mean, what do they have to worry about? It's all on the page. I have any disturbing thoughts, I put them there. In fact, people are occasionally, Kevin, like, how do you sleep knowing that the head on the pillow next to you came up with that stuff? And
as long as it's on the page, I'm safe.
Yeah, it's when it sits in there fermenting that other people need to worry. So.
The things she came up with when she was writing children's books and wasn't allowed to write them, I'm not going back.
Which actually reminds me, I should tell the last story about the ultimate inspiration for House with Good Bones, which is a friend of mine named Shepard, who was a COVID refugee and staying with us during the early part of the pandemic. I was out planting potatoes, and I was singing badly the potato song, which some of you know, it's a folk song about "You're my little potato, I dug you up, you come from underground." You can find it on YouTube. Anyway, in addition to the fact I'm a terrible singer, Shepard is like, what the hell kind of song is that? Children, okay, first of all, that's creepy, and possibly because of my singing. And secondly, children do not come from underground. And I said, absolutely without thinking, the underground children do. And Shepard was like, and so it has honestly been a feature of our relationship ever since that occasionally he will say something and I will just, come out with basically a horror plot in response to the point where he will just be like, don't say it. I see that look in your eyes. It's the I just thought of something that will keep me up all night look, and do not say it. No, what? So anyway, yes, I didn't remember to put in the acknowledgments of the book that large chunks of it came about because of me trying to creep out my French shepherd, but that should have been in there, and I feel bad it didn't make it to press. Anyway, I think our time is up. So thank you all so much for coming out. The book is out. There isn't a dog in this one, but if there was, it would live.
The vulture lives.
Yes, the vulture.
Yeah, it's good seeing you. Sorry, it is time for my restless leg apparently to go into overdrive.
Oh, good.
I would be destroyed. I had to sit through a 2.5 hour. Ursula, turn off your microphone. I had to sit through a 2.5 hour keynote at a work event a couple weeks ago, and I had to stop. Switch on pop. No idea.
Oh no.
No idea. I'm sure they